anything, I'm just going to tilt my mic down to you, okay?
Oh, sure, okay.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Abington High School District Board meeting of August 17th, 2022. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Abdullah?
Here.
Mr. Azar?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mrs. Henderson? Here. Mrs. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Medensky?
Here.
Mr. Robeson?
Here.
Mrs. Tierney?
Here.
Mr. Acker?
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. May we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved. Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Are there any board reports?
We had a facilities meeting, I'm trying to find the date, but I believe it was last week, Wednesday, the 10th, and to kick off the KCBA initiative, facilities initiative.
It's going well.
It was very high level, so, but yes, it went well.
Great, that's good news. The negotiating committee met with the support staff representatives to have a second negotiating session, and that was on August 11th. Any other board reports? Okay, we don't have any student representatives, so we'll turn it over to Dr. Schaefer.
At this point, I don't have any presentations. Just to add on to what Mr. Fleming mentioned about KCBA, we did have a kickoff meeting. The KCBA architect group went through our schools. At this time, we're first starting with a smaller focus group of our principals and their leadership teams. They'll be meeting with the KCBA group by building on August the 24th and 31st. And then from that point, we will branch out into some larger focus groups that would involve some parents, students, and community members.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, the next item is public participation. Mr. McLean?
Hello. Good evening. Jeff McLean, Ransom Township. I'm also the assistant basketball coach at Abington Heights for the last 26 years. Just a few things that we had a coaches meeting, mandatory, that Mr. Snyder ran. I just want to shout out to Mr. Randy Hanyon, who this is his last week as the athletic director for the past 11 years. A lot of people on the board, a lot of people in the community don't realize how difficult the athletic director job is. You have almost 1,000 athletes, so you have 2,000 plus parents, plus some crazy coaches that, you know, drive Mr. Hanyon crazy all the time. And now that Rico is taking over, he's an ex-player of mine. so I will make sure that I drive him crazy also. But I just wanted to, for his dedication and his service to all the student athletes, what a wonderful job Mr. Hanyon has done. It's always Mr. Hanyon. He's my immediate supervisor. Like Coach Bianchi is still Coach Bianchi. But through that meeting, I'm glad to see that the vision statement for Abington Heights has changed, because from the first 26 years that I'm coaching here, the Abington Heights sports program was, and I was told this, we do more with less. And I was told that for the first 26 years that I'm coaching here. So for us to change it to Abington Heights, where students are the focus and excellence is the standard, was very happy to hear that and see that come through. A few things that came out of the coaches meeting. I know that, and I've been coming to school board meetings and watching them on YouTube for quite a while. My kids graduated in 2011 and 2015, and I was coming when there was only two of us in this, and Mr. Acker and Mrs. Tierney probably understood, there was only two of us sitting here.
We remember you, don't worry.
Yeah. And with that being said, some of the things that came out, and I understand that we have a new AD, got a nice little bump in salary. We had another stipend in January, and believe me, when I'm not here, I'm watching. And I saw another stipend. So what came out of the coaches meeting is a lot of us most senior coaches with the most experience have had our salaries frozen for years now. Years. And I see everyone getting theirs. Well, we just want to be fair. We just want what's fair. It's not about the money. It's what we see as disrespect. And that's what we see. We see the disrespect of, the coaches don't need it. It's not that we don't need it. We travel, we don't put in mileage. There's a lot of things that people don't, they just think we show up to the games and coach. There's a lot more to that. Letters of recommendation. I just wrote one for Harry Johnson to get a job out in Colorado for the summer. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on that people don't realize that we do. A couple other things. There is a huddle program that most of the coaches use. A lot of the schools are going to putting cameras at the fields, at the facilities, in the gyms, to make sure our kids get recognized, and it's so much easier. And I know Mr. Snyder talked about NHFS or whatever it was, but that's to make money. This huddle is not to make money. This is to give our kids an opportunity to play at the next level, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. So if we're putting students first, this is something that should be looked into. I know the football program has always paid for it, and we've reimbursed, our booster clubs have reimbursed for basketball and girls basketball. So I'm just looking to have someone to take a look at it. We'll be happy to have a meeting, how we do things. And last but not least, I see on the agenda that, do we have to request as coaches to use our facilities? I see that Abington Heights girls volleyball had a request for their practices. Do we have to, do I have to start requesting on November 18th to use the main gym for my practice? I saw that. That's the first time I ever saw a sports program in the district having to request their gym. So I'm just looking to see if... No, it's the Abington Heights girls volleyball. Yeah, at Clark Summit Elementary, yeah. 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 But the way they have a tryouts and everything else that's on the agenda. And that's all I have.
Mr. McLean, thank you very much for your service,
All right, thank you.
and we appreciate your comments very much.
All right, thank you.
Just to make sure that we're correct, because we're using a different facility, but we'll check it.
Okay, the next would be our action and discussion items, and the first would be to request the board approve the bills. May I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second.
On the motion?
Oh, I have a question. I noticed in our bills the cafeteria fund. I was just wondering if we could possibly use some of these cafeteria funds for renovations in the cafeteria?
And we actually have in the past. We did the middle school cooler and walk-in freezer project out of those funds. We also, I believe Mrs. O'Day just put purchase orders out for ovens?
2 new ovens at the middle school because they're currently broke. The ones we have there are broken, so that's going to be somewhere between 35 and 40,000 for the 2 new ovens there.
And you'll take this out of the
Comes out of the hot
cafeteria fund?
lunch fund, yes.
Because right now, there's, this report's $587,000, almost $589,000. So I was just wondering if that's only for cafeteria, right?
Yes, so we will reinvest that into the program. Yeah, that's the only use for those funds.
It's just for the middle school right now? Are there other cafeterias in our buildings that need any?
So those are the areas that needed most attention.
Okay.
We continually evaluate with our partners at METS the facility. And so whatever improvements come up, we do have a lot of equipment that is end-of-life type situation. So we'll look to replace equipment with that. But it does take time to work through the process just to get these purchase orders in.
Yeah.
The state has to approve them. It's a whole different layer of governance. But yes, that's what those
Because
funds
that's a
are.
high amount, right? I mean, do we have to keep a certain amount of funds in this cafeteria fund?
Actually, some districts actually put tax dollars into the cafeteria funds because it's not self-sustaining. So we have, sort of the opposite
right.
problem.
Yeah.
Largely with universal reimbursement over the COVID years, there was a little higher participation and there was a higher reimbursement in the most recent year. So that really was a driver to get the balance to where it is. But again, we intend to analyze the operation and where we can serve students better. That's what we're going to use the funds for.
Thanks, Jim.
In looking at the bills, I don't have them in front of me, but I noticed one line item was a PSCA medical insurance, I believe. Can you explain that a little bit?
So that would be the dental insurance. We do subscribe, I believe, for our professional staff. That's the vendor for dental insurance.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? Roll call, please. Mrs. Tierney?
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
May we have the treasurer's report, please?
Yes, you may, Mr. Ecker. We started the month of July with $11,513,005. We had monthly revenues of $846,141 for a total cash available of $12,359,147. Our net disbursements for the month were $3,345,399, which leaves us a cash balance of $9,013,747.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second. On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Dr. Schaefer, can we have the personnel report, please?
Yes, before I do the personnel report, Jim has a few words.
Yeah, if you indulge me for just a second, there is one retirement on this agenda, and that's Amy Lang, and she's been our payroll person for longer than I've been here. She served as an aide in the district and then became our payroll person quite some time ago. And I've had the pleasure of working with her for almost 11 years now. She's our rock, and a very important position in the district is getting people paid, right? So Amy was very accurate and very precise in everything she did, and we always love working with her, and we thank her for her service.
With that said, Mr. Ackert, I ask the board to consider approving in the personnel report numbers 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Ackert, I ask that the board consider for approval the substitute teacher appointments as contained in item 1.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
I have a comment on this. Dr. Schaefer, this is the first time in a long time that we've approved substitute teachers. Can you explain to the community this process now?
Sure, and I will in a second kick it over to Dr. Vitale, because we are approving these names because of her hard work and diligence. This spring, we decided that we would be more effective as a district and certainly more efficient as an organization if we took back our substitute services, that we identified, we recruited, we onboarded, we developed our substitutes. And that was a monumental task, and Dr. Vitale and her group has done an excellent job in recruiting a lot of folks. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
did I think there was a question in there, and I may have forgotten it. Or did I answer?
You answered great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then you're off the hook.
Oh, shucks. Roll call, please.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Prior to the next item, I want to mention that before we put this up, that there has been no increases to elementary and secondary lunch prices. The only difference here is for adults, and that's because we were just out of compliance that way. I don't know if I'm mischaracterizing it.
yeah.
We need, the adult lunches needed to be by state code a certain amount over student lunches, so we made sure that we met that standard. So with that said, Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider approving the following prices for the school lunches outlined.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please. Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the Title III Consortium Memorandum of Understanding with NEIU 19, item number 2.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the transportation contracts as contained in item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? I'd like to thank Mr. Mirabelli for putting this together and doing a great job. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board to consider approving letters H, I, and J.
So moved.
Second. On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, ask that the board, Phil's calling us.
All right, you're back.
I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the NEIU Student Assistance Program Letter of Agreement for 22-23 school year as outlined in item number 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the August volunteer list as outlined in item 8.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the Abington Heights School District Paraprofessional Personal Care Assistant job description as contained in item number 9.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Next item of business is informational, listing the request for use of the school facilities. And Mr. McLean, you bring up a good question, which we'll have to find out what's going on.
I have some questions as well on the informational items.
Okay.
Mr. McLean asked the same question that I was going to ask, but I also want to go a little further with some of these. Can the Abington Heights Junior Comets, they are using the high school turf, pit, concessions, football for cheer games, Sundays through October 9th. The fee is no charge. I think that's great. I love the Junior Comets. I think it's wonderful, but haven't they always paid a charge for the usage of our facilities during their season because they receive funds to be able to participate? I love the Junior Comets. I think it's a great opportunity for kids. It's not against them. I just want to understand what our protocol is for all of our sports that are not district sports, that are community sports.
We have a pre-existing criteria and pay scale that we use, and at this point, I have not deviated from how it was approved or not approved in the past. And from my understanding, and I'll double check that the Junior Comets met that criteria for that.
Also for the lacrosse program, is that a high school lacrosse program, the Abington Heights Attack Lacrosse?
No.
So that's a community, feeder program for?
Yeah, it's a
okay.
commuter, it's a travel team, community travel team.
No, it's Rick.
Is it Rick?
Yeah, it's Rick. It's the same as junior commerce.
It's the same as junior commerce for lacrosse. So it's a junior up through 8th grade, though, because lacrosse is only a school sport starting in 9th grade.
Yeah, I do see, I'm concerned of the usage of the turf field. We're using the turf field an awful lot. I think it's important for us to make sure that we measure all the different sports that are using it at all the different times. Is it possible to offer those facilities to our pit, the junior comets to the pit? I see the pit's on here, but could the turf be used if weather is permitted, if it's a weather issue? And the same thing with lacrosse. Can lacrosse use our pit or one of our soccer fields? Because the usage, we're already overusing it for our varsity and junior varsity sports, and I'm concerned that if we continue to keep it open for everyone, that it's, I understand if there's a weather issue and it's your home advantage, but I'm wondering if maybe we could make some alterations in some of these feeder program sports.
So I would just make the comment that if it's costing the district, so I used to be very active in the Summit Wrestling Club, and because they use, and I know the Gators also use the indoor facilities, and they both definitely pay the school. And it was always explained to us that it's because there's costs associated with that. They, have to clean up and they have to, pay staff to do things, whereas the outdoor facilities, I don't know if that's the case, maybe it is. But certainly if we're out of pocket, I think it's reasonable to ask these organizations to at least cover our costs. As far as asking them to pay a fee on top of that to use the facilities, I don't think that I would want to do that for their regular practices. But like if they're going to hold a tournament and make money off of it, because that's what some of them would like to do. If they're going to have a lacrosse tournament, and if the organization was going to profit off of it, then I think it's reasonable. But just for their regular practices, as long as they're covering our costs, I think that would be great. And I don't know the answer to why these are zero and why the indoors, at least that I'm familiar with, had a charge. But
The Gators was a cost, yeah.
I can provide the board with the criteria. Some of the questions that you just brought up are kind of like binaries in the request. So you're a nonprofit, are you charging, are you getting any money? So all of that kind of goes into it, as well as if you're inside and we have to have a custodian, or if we're outside and we have to line a field, or have to pick up some of the trash, things like that. So those are all considerations that go into that criteria. And then there's a pay scale based on anywhere from elementary, middle, high, gymnasium, auditorium, things like that.
And to Michelle's point about the use of the turf field, should we be assessing that, meaning we don't have any data, so to speak, of usage? So is that something our new athletic director can look at to see what we use for our, sporting events, and then, the other extracurricular events, just to get a comparison?
I think Randy did have.
Did he?
Yeah, he did actually have a log of how much usage it was, and
Good.
we are using it a lot.
So maybe we need to look at that. Maybe we need to look at that data just to assess it.
Mr. Azar?
the only thing I would add is that I'm familiar with both, all the organizations we've been talking about as being rec organizations. When I say rec, for those that aren't familiar, rec means that they're a local Abington team playing other school districts near us. There's also an incredible growth in travel sports, and there are many travel organizations in the Abingtons where the coaches are paid. And all of these, like Summit Wrestling, and several other sports, they're not paid. It's all volunteers. But I think a good question for the organizations is: are they a travel team? Are they a team for profit, or are they truly a rec team?
Okay, so we're going to look into it a little bit further with the new athletic director and throw them in immediately, right?
Exactly.
I just want to make sure we're all consistent with all of our,
I think it's a good comment and a good question. Any new business? Old business? I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you all.
See you later, Phil.
Thank you. Bye-bye.